Hey class, so next we're going to solve systems by elimination. So elimination just means that we have two equations. Remember, that's a system of equations. We have two equations and we want to solve for both variables. So we want to solve for the x and the y. So what we want to do is we want to eliminate one of the variables so that I can get it down to one variable. Once I have that one variable, I can solve for it, and then I can sub it back into the other equation and figure out what the other variable is. So in elimination, what you want to do is have one variable or one coefficient be one number and the other one be the opposite number. So if you notice, this is 5x, this is negative 5x, so that whenever I add them, they will eliminate each other. So if I have 5x and I subtract 5x, I'm left with 0 x's. And what I should be left with is y, and y should be pretty easy to solve for. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to add, kind of like old school adding style. We're going to add our x's, add our y's, and add our whatever they're equal to. Now remember, our form has to be all of our x's and y's are going to be on one, all of our variables on one side of the equation, everything else on the other. So I add those, I get the x's cancel out. Then I have y plus y, which is going to be 2y, equals, and then 9 plus 7 is going to be 16. All right, so now we have a really easy equation to solve for. Divide both sides by 2, we'll get y equals 8. So now that we have y equals 8, then what I'm going to do, I'm going to sub this back into one of my first equations. I'm going to choose the first one. You can choose the second one. You should get the same answer no matter what. So we're going to go 5x plus, in this case 8 is replacing the y, equals 9. So then we solve for our equation. So we subtract 8 from both sides. And I get 5x equals 1. And then I'm going to divide both sides so that x equals 1/5. So whenever I write my solution, it's going to be 1 over 5, comma, my y was equal to 8. So remember, we always need an x and we always need a y, so that's going to be our ordered pair. So that's how you solve systems with elimination. So now, what happens, if you look here, I've got a negative and a negative, so my y's, they don't have the opposite signs this time. So what we can do is we can multiply everything through by a -1. If I multiply by a -1, that means I got to multiply one side by negative. That means I got to multiply the other side by negative. So everything's going to change the sign. So this is going to change to a negative. That's going to change to a positive, and this changes to a negative. So now we have the same situation we had in number 1. So now I can add them. So 4x minus 3x is going to leave me with 1x. My y's cancel out, and I'm left with 3. So now I don't have to divide or anything. Earlier we had 2y. We'd had to divide by 2. I don't have to do anything to this. So now that I have x, I can sub it into either equation. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose the first one. You can choose the second one. It really doesn't matter. So 4 times 3 minus y, I don't know what y is, equals 10. So now I want to solve for y. So I'm going to go ahead and simplify, multiply this out. 12 minus y equals 10. Then we want to subtract 12 from both sides. So I get negative y equals -2. So this is implied that there's a -1. So divide both sides by -1. So y equals a +2. And then we want to report our answer as an ordered pair. So I've got my x is 3, and my y is +2. So that would be my answer. 3, +2 is my answer for number 2. Now sometimes you're going to get your elimination problems. So everything, I got my x's and my y's all on one side of the equation. But I got a problem. I can't straight up multiply by a negative here or here. So we got a problem. So usually I can multiply one equation by a number. So earlier we multiplied by -1. This one, I have to multiply this equation by a number, and I also have to multiply this equation by a number. So we want them to be the same. Now it doesn't matter which one we choose. You can choose the x or you can choose the y. And what we're going to do is I'm going to take this equation, I'm going to multiply it by 3. I'm going to take this equation, I'm going to multiply it by -4, so that my x's end up being opposite numbers, but they're going to be the same, and they can cancel out. And then we're left with y, and then we can solve for that. So I'm going to go ahead and multiply this by 3. We're going to multiply this one by a -4, just so that I have opposite signs, so that whenever I add them, they cancel out. So my first equation, we're just going to write it on the next line. So 4x times 3, that's going to be 12x minus 21y. Now remember, I'm distributing the 3 to everything in my equation, because whatever you do to one side of your equation, you have to do it to the other. So now I'm going to multiply this by -4, so that gives me -12x. That's minus 8y equals positive 28. So we just multiplied the -4 times the -7, negative times the negative makes it positive. All right, now I have a -12, I have a 12x minus 12x. So now I can add just like we did earlier, those cancel out. I'm left with -29. Y equals, subtract or add those, that's going to be 58. Okay, then we divide by -29. So y is equal to -2. Now once I get the y, then I have to sub it back in and get the x. So you can sub it into this equation or this equation. I'm going to use this one just because the numbers are smaller. So I'm going to use 3x plus 2 times -2 equals -7. And then we just solve that equation for x. So multiply out, that's -4. And my 3x equals -7. Add 4 to both sides. So get 3x equals -3. Divide both sides by 3. So x equals -1. So we report our score as an ordered pair. So -1, -2. So that is my final solution. And that is how you solve systems of equations with elimination.